Ivan Miroshnichenko to the Hershey Bears and Andrew Cristall back to the Kelowna Rockets. Hi, this is Dan Homey of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So that was the word that was broke today, was that Miroshnichenko was going to be loaned to the Hershey Bears, and that Andrew Cristall, who many had high hopes, I had high hopes for, would be sent back to the Kelowna Rockets. So it does appear, as I record this, is that Jacob Vrana, who joined this team on a professional tryout, is going to crack the roster. It is not 100% for sure thing, but it does appear to be trending in that direction. And if you are an everydayer of the show, you know I put out a podcast 10 days ago stating that I thought that Jacob Vrana would be that perfect extra skater for the Capitals. There was some question if there was going to be two extra skaters on the forward lines or if there was going to be two on the defense. As it turns out, they went with two on the blue line, which appears to be McElrath and Alexeyev, which just left one spot available for the forwards. And it does appear as though the Capitals are going to be going with Jacob Vrana. Now, there were a couple different scenarios, say that they had gone with only one extra defender and they had two forwards. Then I think the door could have definitely been open for Cristall joining this team and Jacob Vrana. But it's kind of an interesting situation when we talk about Andrew Cristall, is that he could not go to the Hershey Bears just based on the fact that he's 19. So he had those two options, which were A, to join the Capitals and play on the Capitals for the season, or B, go to the Kelowna Rockets. Now, there was a bit of a caveat there, was that if he could play 10 or fewer games, or less than 10 games rather, that would not affect his entry-level deal. So the Capitals did the right thing ultimately at the end of the day. Is I don't think it would have been the right idea to cut Jacob Vrana and have Andrew Cristall on the team if they only had plans for him being on the Capitals for up to 9 games. So you would have cut ties with Jacob Vrana to have Andrew Cristall on the team for 9 games. It just didn't make sense. And as far as Ivan Miroshnichenko is concerned, I think that it wasn't a horrible camp for him. It was definitely not a stellar camp either. So I think that ultimately that is why he was loaned back to the Hershey Bears. Now, I do think that we will get an opportunity to see Ivan at some point this season, depending on what pans out, what kind of injuries affect the forward lines, and what do we ultimately get out of Sonny Milano. Just because he cracked the roster doesn't mean that the Capitals have bigger plans for him if he doesn't pan out. You know, that's always the case. As of right now, as I record this on Monday, it does appear that the lineup is pretty much set. We know that yesterday Hunter Shepard was put on waivers for the purposes of going to the Hershey Bears. It's a bit of an interesting situation for him as well, as he was the number one netminder in all of the AHL last year. Is someone going to come in and scoop him up? I was just talking with someone on YouTube not too long ago saying, well, why would a team want to trade for him when they can get him for free? And to address that, it's if in fact he clears waivers and gets sent to the Hershey Bears, that at some point the Capitals would be wise to trade him. Now, of course, someone could scoop him up off the waiver wire, but it's an interesting thing. You know, there are teams that are looking for depth and goaltending, and I think that Hunter Shepard would definitely fit that bill. Number one netminder in the AHL, and was the MVP in the Calder Cup last season, or the season before rather, for the Hershey Bears. So, you know, the raw talent is there. I know that it has been kind of a lukewarm time with his tenure on the big team with the Capitals, but there's a guy that has killed it every step along the way. So a lot of questions for the Capitals before 5 p.m. A lot of those have been answered. When I say a lot of questions, there were a lot of questions. A lot of those questions have already been answered, as it does appear that the lineup is set for opening night on Saturday. What are we going to expect from this Capitals team this year? That is the interesting question. As I was listening to the 32 Thoughts podcast with Elliot Friedman this morning, and they kind of did a rapid fire thing there talking about they rattled off the teams in the NHL and they gave their thoughts about if they thought they were going to make it to the playoffs. Elliotte Friedman, his knee-jerk reaction was that the Capitals will not make it to the playoffs. Seems to be kind of a lot of people have that thought process. Like I talked about, I did that Locked On crossover with 4 different teams from the Metro, and they all picked the Capitals as not making it to the playoffs. I don't know about you, Caps fan. That was a shot across my bow as a Caps fan and a shot across the Capitals' bow, as many people panning this team as not being good enough to make it to the playoffs, despite the fact that the Capitals traded for and got PLD, Mangiapane, Chychrun, Roy, Logan Thompson. Big addition. Some people said that the Capitals were the most aggressive team in the Metro Division. Despite all of that, many people are panning this team as not being up for the challenge of making it to the playoffs or a deep push or a contender for the Stanley Cup. I guess it remains to be seen. What kind of season do we get out of Alex Ovechkin? What kind of season do we get out of Alex Ovechkin right out of the gate? We know that he got off to his slowest start in the goal-scoring department last year, turned on the Jets in the second half, that we need to see more of that. But now the Capitals are in a good position where all of that weight is not resting squarely on his shoulder. No doubt he is expected to do great things in the goal-scoring department, but they have other options now. We have Pierre-Luc Dubois on paper is going to really help in that pursuit. Mangiapane, not to mention, the roster that was built around it, Duhaime, Radish, and that the blue line looks a lot better. So I think that, the blue line, especially in Chychrun's case, he can chip in offensively as well. So I think the Capitals are in at least a better position than they were last year. If we take a look at last year, it was a Capitals team that did little to nothing in the off season the year before, as we know that they acquired Edmondson and Max Pacioretty. So in a lot of ways, I think the Capitals realized that roster was not built for bigger and better things anymore, that they squeezed as much juice as they possibly could out of that lineup, and they needed to address it. I mean, let's face it, Capitals fans, this team is an older team, now trending in a younger direction with a lot of the acquisitions that were made, that I think on paper the Capitals will be better. And to kind of circle back and talk about Jacob Vrana, he at least addresses one of those issues, and that is speed. They were dubbed as old and slow. Well, he at least addresses one of those issues with his speed. Not necessarily the youngest man anymore, not the oldest guy either, but he was key, an integral part of the 2018 Stanley Cup push, that is for sure. So as I record this right now, I think the Capitals are in a pretty good position. And it's one of these things. BMAC said risky moves to make this team better. And what did they do this offseason? They didn't mortgage the farm. They didn't mortgage the future to make these big moves that ostensibly would help this team. They didn't go after the Gensel, the Marchessault, the Stamkos, those kind of players. What they ended up doing is picking up players that on paper, if you take a look at the back of their hockey card, historically have been really great players. So, I think that, Elliotte Friedman is a premier insider, doesn't necessarily know the team as well. And it's interesting that people kind of follow the lines that have been fed to them. It's kind of a common thought that the Capitals are not going to be able to do anything. Now, I'm not going to etch their name on the side of the Stanley Cup, but I do have high hopes for this team, and I hope they can do better than they did the year before. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this midday edition of Locked On Capitals, and let me know if you like these. I plan on doing more of these throughout the season, kind of getting you guys caught up, but that is the big news that we found out today, is that Miro loaned to the Hershey Bears, Cristall back to the Kelowna Rockets, and as I record this right now, it does appear as though that Jacob Vrana cracked the roster, and he did make good on that professional tryout, and he very well will be a part of the Capitals this coming season. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.